Hey, vinyl community, how's it going? Holy crap, was it hot out today? I don't know about where you live, but it was almost 100 degrees here in Metro Detroit, Michigan today. I get home from work and it's like, oh, it's a little bit warmer than I thought. I set the thermostat. So anyway, I look around. I've got no power. The electricity was completely out. Which could have picked a better day for me to lose electricity. But fortunately, within about an hour and a half, it was back up. So it was no huge catastrophe, but a little shock to the system when I got home from work this afternoon. But anyway, wanted to do a video today and talk about, first of all, this is kind of about record collecting, because when you become a record collector, you got to start somewhere. Your collection has to begin somewhere. And so I wanted to show the first 5 albums. Well, I'm showing 5 albums. Back up. I'm not going to edit this video. How do I put this? So I'm going to show the first album, vinyl album I ever bought by my 5 of my favorite artists. Does that make any sense? I know I'm kind of stumbling all over my words, but bear with me. So the first vinyl album that I bought by my 5 of my favorite artists, let's say, shall we? Because for me, my top 5 artists, it ebbs and flows depending on my mood, depending on the time of year, whatever. So anyway, let's start with my favorite band of all time, the Beatles. And so when I was, let's say, about 10 years old, couldn't afford any records. And so like most people, I think my age, I did have a tape recorder. And so I would listen to the radio. And when I heard a Beatles song come on, I would push my little tape recorder up to the speaker in my room, press record, and then when the song was over, I would hit stop. Then I'd wait again fortunately, we had a good rock and roll station that played a lot of Beatles, so I wouldn't have very long to wait, but I would wait. Sometimes I would turn the dial and try to find another station that might play a Beatles song. And then if I heard it, I would press record and tape that song. And it's funny because the first time I ever heard Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band on the radio, I was unfamiliar with the album at all. All I knew were Beatles songs. And I remember when that song came on and then it segued right into With a Little Help from My Friends. I'm like, whoa, this is a twofer. I can't believe I'm getting 2 songs for one. Not realizing that that was the way that the songs flowed on the Sgt. Pepper album. So anyway, all I had were these cassette tapes with radio recorded Beatle albums. My dad was not a Beatle fan. He didn't own any Beatle records. My mom could kind of take or leave the Beatles, honestly. I think it was just oversaturation. They'd heard enough of the Beatles growing up in the 60s and didn't feel the need to own any of their records, or didn't have that big of an affection. My dad was more of a Rolling Stones fan anyway. Did not own a single Beatle album. So I remember, I think I'd made some money mowing lawns, or somehow, you know, it was my allowance or whatever. But I remember my dad taking me to Kmart, which if you're not from this area, you're not familiar with Kmart is. Kmart's basically a discount retailer, kind of like Target. But Kmart, before Target ever came on the scene, that was like the place that our family would go and shop. And they had a pretty decent sized record section. And so I remember going, and the cheapest Beatle albums that I could find were the Rock and Roll Music Volume 1 and Volume 2. And back then I didn't realize that back in the 70s, this was a 2-record set that came in a gatefold, a tacky looking gatefold, silverish gatefold sleeve. But anyway, this is the budget release. Eventually Capitol on their green budget label ended up putting out these records separately, and I bought them both on the same day. And the thing that's cool about these records is a lot of these songs I'd never heard before, because they weren't songs that typically were played on the radio station that I listened to. Songs like You Can't Do That. I'd never heard that song before. I Want to Be Your Man. Had never heard that song. I Call Your Name. Nope. Slow Down. First time I'd ever heard that. Bad Boy. So a lot of these songs I'd never heard. And so it was really interesting. At least for me, I was so happy to have this because I was never going to hear these songs on the radio. And now, and that's the thing, if any of you youngsters are watching, back in the 70s when I was buying these records, late 70s, early 80s, you know, it was something to actually own some of the songs. You might hear them on the radio, or if you managed to tape record them, but usually you'd have the DJ talking over the first couple of seconds of your song, and same with at the end, it would fade out, but then another song would fade right in. So to actually have like these songs, physical copies of these records, these songs that I could play anytime I wanted to hear them. I didn't have to wait around hoping that they would come on the radio. And they were songs that I hadn't heard on the radio. I mean, this was like a revelation. It was so cool. I remember just being in my bedroom for like 2 weeks straight. Every day when I would come home from school, I would throw these records on the turntable and just listen to them from start to finish. And I can't say I spend nearly that much time. Unfortunately, being busy and whatnot, having a family who doesn't necessarily want to listen to the Beatles 24/7. Times have changed, but what a golden time that was, discovering these Beatles songs for the first time and actually having them and being able to play them whenever I wanted was definitely a thrill. So, kind of the same situation, and there was a long time where the only thing I bought were Beatle records. I wasn't interested in any other bands. I had some other records that were hand-me-downs that relatives had given me because they didn't want to listen to them anymore. Boston's first album was one of those. The Best of the Bee Gees, the first Bee Gees compilation I'd gotten as a hand-me-down. Elton John's first live album, the 1970, the black cover where it's just his silhouette grabbing the microphone, his profile, very cool. That was a hand-me-down I got. But eventually I was like, okay, I want to start exploring other kind of music. And another band that I knew that I liked because of stuff that I'd heard on the radio I really enjoyed was The Police. Now, I should qualify by saying those are not the original records. I sold my entire vinyl record collection when the CD renaissance hit. Everybody thought vinyl is dead. Everybody's buying CDs. So anyway, I sold off all my vinyl. So those were not the original Beatle records that I owned. They're in way too good shape. By the time I sold those, they were all beat up. I didn't take care of my records, not like I do now, because I didn't have that mentality. Like, you know, you really want to keep these in good shape because you want to preserve these for when you're old. And didn't enter into my thought process. But band that I really enjoyed on the radio was The Police. And so a very similar story. I made some money cutting grass and went to Kmart again, and I picked up this album. This is not the copy I had. Same deal. I sold off that record 30 years ago or however long it was. But it was Zenyatta Mandata. And again, I'd heard the do-do-do-da-da-da-da, and I'd heard Don't Stand So Close to Me, but the rest I hadn't heard. I fell in love with this album. This album is awesome. I like Ghost in the Machine. It's my #1 album, but this is #2. No question about it. I loved it. There's so many great songs on here. Driven to Tears is excellent, and they were all catchy songs. They all rocked pretty hard. When the world is running down, you make the best of what's still around. Canary in a Coal Mine. Voices Inside My Head was great. Bombs Away. Love that one. You know, the next side also, Man in the Suitcase was a great track. Shadows in the Rain. This album was amazing. And eventually, I remember I got this record and my brother's like, well, I'm getting Reggatta de Blanc, and he got Reggatta de Blanc. And then I got Synchronicity, he got Ghost in the Machine, and then I got Outlandos Steal More. And I'm like, scoreboard, I got 3 Police albums, you got 2. And it's the same way today. I've got 5 Police albums, he's got 2, because I bought Reggatta de Blanc, and I bought Ghost in the Machine. I've got 2 copies of Ghost in the Machine. Scoreboard. Anyway, he's not watching this video, but I'm just saying. So, Police, Zenyatta Mandata. Now, I have a complicated history with this next band, Beach Boys, because growing up, I remember hearing all my family, my uncles and my dad, and my mom had like all these Beach Boys singles, and they had some greatest hits compilations. And I remember enjoying, like growing up, I remember loving the Beach Boys, but then I got to a certain point, it was probably like junior high, or when I discovered the Beatles. It was like, I just didn't want to know. I don't care about the Beach Boys, those striped shirt wearing, car songs, singing. Beach Boys seemed like they were not cool, so I wasn't interested. I was kind of laser focused on the Beatles and some other bands that I thought were much cooler than the Beach Boys. And then I kind of got rediscovering them, like kind of in my later years in high school. My girlfriend at the time was into the Beach Boys. She had a bunch of Beach Boys cassettes, and I would listen to them. We'd be driving around, and she'd have them in the cassette player, and I'd be like, wow, this stuff is actually pretty good. And we're talking like none of the songs from Pet Sounds were on those like cheap Capitol cassettes. They were like the budget cassettes where you got 4 songs per side, very cheap. But I remember thinking, this stuff is better than I remember. I remember, when I was not digging the Beach Boys, I remember making fun of Brian Wilson's vocal. Just his falsetto. Making fun of his falsetto and thinking, how stupid. But then I like rediscovered the Beach Boys, and I'm like, this is actually great music. And when I had my original vinyl collection, I didn't have any Beach Boy records. But when I started rebuying vinyl, the very first Beach Boy record, and this is the first Beach Boy record I own, period, because I never collected them before, like I said, but found this one, Best of the Beach Boys, which was the first Beach Boys compilation. It was actually released only a few months after the Pet Sounds album, when commercially Pet Sounds was kind of, I don't want to say it tanked, but in terms of sales, it was very disappointing. So Capitol, in a very panicked move, decided to put out a Beach Boys greatest hits in late 1966 for the Christmas market. And you got Best of the Beach Boys. And it is volume 1. And I think they knew they were going to follow it up with a Beach Boys volume 2, because they could have put a lot stronger songs on here. I mean, you've got Surfin' USA, Catch a Wave, Surfer Girl, Little Deuce Coupe, In My Room, Little Honda, solid first side. Then you've got Fun, 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 Warmth of the Sun, Louie Louie. I don't consider that the best of the Beach Boys, a cover song, no less. Then you got Kiss Me Baby, which is from Summer Days, Summer Nights, and wait a minute, no, it's not. It's from the Today album. I'm sorry. It's from Beach Boys Today, but not exactly a blow your mind rocker. I don't know that that classifies as a hit. You're So Good to Me, decent song. And then you got Wendy. And then they would follow up in 1968 with the volume 2. But this one is a strong album. Great. I'm very happy with it when I first bought it, because it had enough hits to begin my Beach Boy collection. But happy to have that. That's also now available, like the Capitol budget line vinyl, I think is a copy I had. Rolling Stones. Like I said, my dad was a Rolling Stones fan, so we had Rolling Stones albums all around the house. But when I decided, this was not my original album collection, but when I started building my vinyl collection, rebuilding my vinyl collection, first Rolling Stones album record that I ever found was this. Got Live If You Want It. This is the stereo version. This is a live album, considering that there are 2 studio tracks on here that they just dubbed audience sounds onto. Very poor artistic decision. I don't know how large a part the Rolling Stones played in that decision. I suspect they didn't have anything to do with that, but nonetheless, a decent live album. Kind of captures the early excitement of the Rolling Stones, Brian Jones era Rolling Stones. I mean, it leads off with Under My Thumb. How cool is that? Get Off My Cloud, Lady Jane, Not Fade Away, I've Been Loving You Too Long, and Fortune Teller. I've Been Loving You Too Long and Fortune Teller were studio tracks that they just dubbed girls screaming over. So yeah, they're not live. And the second side is pretty decent too. The Last Time, 19th Nervous Breakdown, Time Is On My Side, etc. Great collection of songs. Happy to have that. And woo, I was off on my way buying Rolling Stones. Now, I know it's too late to say this video has gone too long, but I'm going to try to wrap it up here pretty succinctly. One of my other favorite bands is Pink Floyd. Owned a bunch of Pink Floyd cassettes, owned a bunch of CDs, but I didn't pick up my first Pink Floyd record until I was rebuilding my collection, and I found this. This is Wish You Were Here. And what's interesting about this is the cover is different from the CD, or maybe you want to call it the UK cover, where this guy is like leaning forward a little bit more. So I always like this. I always thought it was a bit of a rarity, but I like Wish You Were Here. It was maybe the 4th Pink Floyd album that I'd ever heard. I remember being disappointed when I heard it because it just seemed like very boring for a long time. Like the beginning of Shine On You Crazy Diamond just goes on forever. And when I was in high school and I was used to The Wall and Dark Side of the Moon, Animals, and then you put this on and you're like, is he ever going to start singing? For Christ's sake, is there going to be any vocals on this? And why does it take so long to get to the main melody and lyrics? And then at the end of side 2, it's like the same deal. I just didn't have the patience for it. And I remember being like very bored. I thought, this album sucks. Why do people like this album so much? So it was only when I got a little bit older, I realized this for the masterpiece that it was. But this is the very first record. Yes, the actual copy. Just like that one was. The actual copy of the first record I ever bought. So, anyway, love you guys. Love you guys. Let me give you a big hug. Not to be too creepy, but hope you're doing well. Hope you've enjoyed the video. If you're not a subscriber, shame on you. Give me a sub. And take care.